My girlfriend, Lena, and I were visiting Arizona for a friend's wedding. Driving back to the hotel that night, we experienced what I can only call a waking nightmare. She pointed out a large coyote running along the road. Somehow, it was keeping pace with our rental. I slowed a bit to get a better look. This thing was mangy, but immense. Never seen a coyote like it before. It gained a burst of speed and veered in front of our car. I swerved to avoid it, but we ended up in a ditch. We were shaken, but neither of us was hurt. Lena gasped and pointed to the windshield. The coyote was standing in front of the car, but it was changed. It was standing upright on its hind legs. It swayed side to side, shifting weight from one foot to the other. We didn't know what to do. I thought it was going to rush the car when a set of headlights came over the rise. The creature snarled and bounded into the darkness. The driver must have seen our headlights off the road. He slowed down and called out, asking if we needed help. He gave us a lift to Tuba City, and the next morning, a tow truck brought our car in. I don't know what would have happened if that guy didn't show up when he did. I don't think it would have been a happy say for us. Quit the magic mushrooms or lay off the stuff, dude. But I've been a hunter almost all my life, and I have seen a few strange things. But nothing compares to what I saw in the fall of 2002. I was hunting alone on a property I hadn't hunted before, but I scouted the location and saw plenty of sign. I got to my stand early in the morning. The sky was still pitch black. After I settled in, something caught my attention. I noticed a pale light through the trees. I thought it was the dawn, but the timing was all wrong, and it was coming from the west. I watched as the light grew brighter and moved slowly through the trees. Annoyed, I thought it was another hunter. I was told my use of the property was exclusive. Boy, I wish it was just someone else making his way to his stand. After a minute or two, the source of the light finally came into view. It was a glowing orb about the size of a basketball, just hovering along. There wasn't any sound at all. Not even the normal nighttime sounds. It felt like a dream, but I was wide awake. I watched it float around aimlessly for 10 or 15 minutes. Then suddenly, it shot straight up into the sky and out. I hitched across America to feed myself. I took any job I could. For a couple weeks, I was a ranch hand at a little place outside Decatur. I cherished the fresh air. But I had to give it up after an experience I had one night that I can't fully believe to this day. It was owned by an elderly couple who couldn't quite manage it any longer. I was hired on by one of their sons, who, like his brothers, didn't want much to do with the whole thing. They just needed someone to keep the animals fed and to do some repairs around the place. I was offered a rundown trailer to sleep and keep my sundries for $2.60 an hour. I was happy. Different times. I didn't keep a weapon then, just a camp knife I used for nearly everything. Not long after the incident I'm about to describe, I resolved never to be so defenseless again. It was one of the hottest days I can recollect, and I had retired to my trailer for the evening. I'd just finished my meager meal and was sitting by the door, just to catch any breeze that might happen by. My cooler of beer had only a hint of chill left, but it was enough. There were a few farm dogs that roamed the property. They mostly kept to themselves, but one old mutt took to sleeping under the trailer. He feigned interest in me whenever I had food to beg for. But mostly, we remained aloof neighbors. I stood and faced the trailer door when Old Boy lunged from under the trailer, hackles raised and snarling. He squared up to the darkness. I hadn't heard him utter such a threatening sound before. I gulped in the direction he was facing, but all I could see were shadows and pinpoints of light. After a few seconds, the dog backed himself to the trailer, and I hurried into the door while he went under the floor. I retrieved my knife from the folding table and pressed my face to the window. All the while, I could hear the dogs growl through the floor. This trailer had a few windows, but they had long since frosted over by years of sandblasting. On a sunny day, I could make out the hint of landscape, but in the dark, I might as well have had my eyes closed. Still, I listened hard or tried to over the blood rushing in my head. Another long moment passed, and the dog's threats quieted. Maybe a rival dog had wandered too close to Old Boy's turf and found out. I prepared to hit the sack when I caught the plink of a stone or a bit of metal bounced off the roof. Then again, Old Boy growled low. Now I was certain someone was having fun at my expense. The old dog must have smelled one of the day laborers who I had met. Like I said, the dogs never cared much for any of us. He probably had a particular distaste for this fool, and I didn't blame him. I called out, "You got me now, fuck off." No reply came, but the plinking stopped. The dog quieted again and must have gone to sleep because I couldn't hear him growling anymore. By this time, I was feeling the weight of the day and the adrenaline was wearing off. Satisfied, I crawled into bed. It was set on the far end of the trailer, with a window by my head and one at my feet. I kept the sliders open so wind could pass through. There was no wind at night, but after dozing for I don't know how long, I woke to hot air blowing across my cheek. The world came to me slowly, first the heat, then a rumble and a sharp sound, like a whistle. By the time I came fully awake, a bomb went off. I was slammed into the mattress. Like in a falling dream, but everything was falling with me. I rolled onto the floor. My only thought was, what's that sound? That squealing, horrible sound. I couldn't place it. Then a bang on the wall brought it to a sudden halt. My stomach dropped the instant I realized what I'd just heard. I hunched down and pressed myself against the corner by the bed. In the silence that followed, I could feel the soft, booming steps of something outside the trailer. The hard-packed earth carried the vibrations to my back, pressed against the wall. I sat in silence, listening, until I could see light coming over the horizon. When I finally left the trailer, I turned away from the bloody dent in the wall of the trailer. I didn't look for any more clues as to what happened because my imagination had worked well enough. I hitched out of town that morning, and I've not been back that way since. The whole experience soured my notion of being a New Age beatnik vagabond. I returned home, and the rest is rather ordinary anyway. That's all I have to say on that subject. But I saw something truly unique back during the worst blizzard that I can remember. I was 11 years old, riding with my father to pick up my grandmother. A major blizzard was predicted, and my mother was concerned about Grandma being cooped up at home alone, cut off in the snow. It wasn't a long drive, maybe a half hour normally, but the storm had rolled in, and it was whiteout conditions. My father had us crawling back home. At some point, we came to a stop. There was an accident blocking the road. My father got out to see if he could help. My grandmother and I stayed in the car. I was looking out the window, trying to see what was going on. I saw something come sneaking out of the trees along the road. It was a little old man, and I mean little. He was maybe as tall as I was, but he had skinny legs and long arms. He was wearing a heavy fur coat. It was almost comical. He just slinked across the road and into the trees. Grandma saw him too. I asked what it was. She just shook her head, wide-eyed. We tried to tell my father about it when he came back, but he wasn't having any of it. Are gremlins real, or was that just a little hermit? Looking back, I've since heard other similar stories. My older brother and I spent most summer days exploring a stream near our home. We walked its length many times. There was an old bridge that crossed it in the woods where we built a dam to trap fish. One day, we heard someone walking the bridge, so we stayed quiet and listened. He was mumbling to himself. We couldn't make out what he was saying. When he passed, we ran home. The next day, he was back again. This time, we saw him pacing back and forth about 20 yards away. He was behind some bushes, wearing a fur coat. It was such a hot day, it didn't make any sense. He started groaning loudly and thrashing the bushes violently. Then he stopped and stared at us, swaying back and forth. We bolted back home and stayed away from that bridge for the rest of the summer. Looking back on it, and after hearing other stories from that area, I'm not so sure it was a man at all. Is there anyone else from the Pittsburgh area with a similar spooky story about what happened to me outside of Jacksonboro? So, I was driving home from work, like I always do, and I had to pass by this swamp. It was already dark, and I was the only one on the road. There's no street lights or nothing. I was going along when I saw this dude standing on the side of the road, but naked. He was covered in blood from head to toe. I kid you not. I rolled down my window and asked if he was okay, but he didn't say nothing. He just stared at me with these creepy, empty eyes. It was like he was looking right through me. I got a real bad feeling in my gut and drove off as fast as I could. I didn't know what the heck had happened to that guy, but it wasn't right. And I sure as heck wasn't gonna stick around to find out. I called it in. Never did hear nothing 'bout it though. I avoided that road for a few weeks, but one night I was coming home from out of town. I could either go by the swamp or take the long way. I took the swamp road, and wouldn't you know it, there was that same guy right in the middle of the road, blocking my way. Only this time, he didn't stand there. He ran out in front of my pickup. I hit the brakes, but it was too late. I went right through him, like he wasn't even there. I almost went in the ditch. I looked back, but there wasn't no one there. I don't know what that was all about, but I ain't never driving that road again. It's like something straight out of a horror movie. Not afraid of anything in the woods, except whatever took my dogs one night in '96. I was coon hunting with my 3 hounds. We'd been there many times before, and the dogs knew where all the holes and hollow logs were. The dogs were on it and howling with excitement. They were on the trail about 200 yards out. Then everything went quiet. After a few minutes of silence, I whistled for them, but there was only quiet. Nothing, even the bugs were holding their breath. I followed their trail through the brush to the base of an old tree. The trail stopped. No sign they went anywhere beyond that point. I made my way back to the truck. I figured they'd find the way back in their own time. They knew the way better than I did. I waited 40 minutes to an hour. I'd whistle and honk my horn, but they didn't turn up. Then suddenly, the trees lit up like it was midday. It was like a bolt of lightning hung in the air. I'd never seen anything like that before. I swear the trees were lit up for maybe 5 minutes, then it was dark again in an instant. The air was electrified. It made the hair on my arms stand on end. It's a feeling that's hard to describe. I tell you, I was scared. I decided to leave and come back the next morning. When I came back and called again for the dogs, none came back. I never did find a sign of any of them or where they went. I don't know if the strange light had anything to do with it, but I fear it might.